Good afternoon. Welcome to Nahashon Kimeme Live. And so today I'll be talking about DNA collection. The government is planning to collect DNA from us whenever we go and get a new ID, identification card. And I thought this was a big issue because as per yesterday, this Matiang'i issue was very big and everybody's talking about it. Another issue that I wanted to talk about Nairobi water. I wanted to talk about guys, taxify drivers and all of those things. But this is an issue that I thought I could not leave for another day because it's so important, it's so fundamental. It touches on us, on our very genes. So what's happening? There's an amendment to the Register of Persons Act, right? And this amendment is what is including this kind of thing that I consider very dangerous. And so they're introducing biometrics in the registration of all Kenyans. When you go and get a new ID, you'll have to provide biometric data. It includes fingerprints, right? And other biological identifiers. So what are these identifiers? They include hand, right? And earlobe, you can't see that, yeah, the earlobe, geometry. Why would they need to have like a geometrical map of my earlobe for an ID? They want the retina, right? The pattern of the retina and the iris. And they also want voice waves. And now the actual DNA, your genetic makeup. What makes you you? That's what they want. And I'm thinking this is a bit of an issue. And it's kind of like movie stuff. It's like we're in the movies right now. And it's surprising for me. So they'll collect these DNA samples or all these biological identifiers. And they will stay with the Register of Persons. Like that's a very good department where we should keep our stuff, right? And I'll show how it's very dangerous. So I wanted to give a few examples, right? Like these guys, they want to take our biological identifiers, including our DNA, on top of our fingerprints and all of our contact details and location details, right? And it reminded me of Kim Jong-un. Like when he was flying to Singapore to meet with Trump, he actually flew with his own toilet because he couldn't imagine leaving his tool in a given hotel room where the Americans can access it and then access his DNA or access his biological information, like any disease that he has. So that guy actually went with his own toilet to Singapore. And that's how seriously he takes his biological identifiers. And in this case, the government is putting like a joke, introducing something like a tax on bread. It's not serious about this thing. Kim Jong-un, he was so serious about his biological identifiers that he didn't take a pen when they were signing that agreement with Trump. He actually waited for his sister to take out a pen and give it to him. And that's when he used a pen. Biological identifiers, they are very important. But in Kenya, we're taking it like as a joke. Because you haven't been introduced to the dangers of this kind of stuff being the government having this kind of information. And I'll speak about it in just a bit. So what does this act include, right? Like you have to provide your location where you are. You have to provide your land reference number, your plot number, or your house number. Now that's a lot of information. Back in the day, what you used to provide was a postal address. And I'm thinking guys used also to produce their postal address of, let's say, their school, their church, or those other things. Somewhere where they can get to and then move from there and contact you, right? But now it's actually, they really want to know where you are, including your house number, so that they can get to you as quickly as possible. It's a good thing if they're trying to get to a terrorist. It's a bad thing if the government is terrorizing you. So just think about it. And then they also want global positioning systems in the registration process. And I'm thinking this is movie stuff, enemy of the state stuff, eagle eye stuff, right? Where these guys are using GPS data to locate your position. So that's what the kind of power that our government will have. That in the blink of an eye, they can find out exactly where you are. Woe unto you if you're a dissident. Because where will you run? They will already have your area surrounded. because they have the GPS coordinates. And what is the reason for that? They want your taxes. Anyway, enabling the tracking of an individual via satellite, so that's the GPS system. And then here's another thing. The cabinet secretary, right, in charge of this kind of like security thing, will have the powers to gazette other registration requirements where necessary. So it's all of these things, they might not be enough. The government might be seeking something new, something extra. As if the earlobe geometry of my earlobe geometry is not enough. As if the iris pattern on my eye is not enough. They will want more. And the cabinet secretary will have the powers to gazette more, right? And it reminds me of what Thomas Hobbes called the Leviathan, right? And it's the monster. That's what it stands for. And he viewed the government as a monster that constantly grows. And it will never stop growing. Let me just give you an example, right? The economy grew at 5.7% in 2018, right? Inflation was at 8% or thereabouts. Medical inflation was at 12%. So we have 8%, 12%, but the economy is growing at 5.7%. The government, even when you don't have enough, even when you're not growing enough, it will always take from you or take from the little that you have. Even when it sees that inflation is eating away everything that you have, it will still want more. And how am I saying this? Why am I saying this? Because the government knew these figures, right? But it was increasing taxes at the same time. There's a 2013 study by PwC. It found, right, that Kenyans pay a total tax rate, Kenyan companies, of 44.2%. That was a bit high because the global average is 43.1%. That was in 2013. And we are still trying to compete with all that. We're still trying to be a developed nation with an effective tax rate of 44.2%. At least let's get to the global average of 43.1%. But that's the thing. The government, it doesn't care. It keeps growing. So if it wants more information from you, it will keep asking for more. And that's why they won't stop at the earlobe geometry, at the iris pattern, at the fingerprints, at the GPS location. They'll want more. And they'll give the cabinet secretary more powers to gazette more of what it will consider necessary. Movie stuff. The PwC report said that Kenya ranked 166 out of 189 in the ease of paying taxes. So it's not enough that they're taking so much from us, even when the economy is growing so slowly, right? But even giving them what they are taking from us is difficult. 166 out of 189 ease of paying taxes. And somebody said, taxation is theft. Everything the government has, it has stolen. Everything it says is a lie. So even what it steals, it's hard for us to give this robber, right, whatever he's stealing from us. 166 out of 189. So anyway, economy 5.7%, inflation 8%, medical inflation at 12%, right? Kind of like more than double the economic growth rate, right? And now let's look at mobile money transfers, what they did last year. They increased that from the excise duties from 10% to 12%. Fuel tax increased to 8%. Now 1.5% of an employee's basic salary will go to the National Housing Development Fund, a white elephant project. I covered it some time back. And now there's a presumptive tax of 15%. Like I keep saying, the government will never have enough. It's a monster. It keeps growing. And as soon as it starts asking for information from you, highly personal information, it will never stop. Because that's what it does. It keeps growing. And it won't stop at this information. So is this an abrupt policy, like the collection of data that they want? This earlobe geometry, iris pattern, fingerprints, GPS location, DNA. Is it something new that they just came up with this yesterday? No, it is not. It's called the Integrated Population Registration System, right? And they had tested it for a year, like in 2014. They tested it for that year, I think. And by 2015, right, they had 16 million people within that system, including 200,000 refugees, right? So it launched in 2015, and by that time it had 16 million people and 200,000 refugees. So who are these people? I don't know. So what they want to do, they want to expand it right now. It's not a new thing. They had it by 2014, and they launched it in 2015. Now they want to expand it from the 16 million to the entire population. Like we're around something like 50 million right now. And at the touch of a button, it would produce all your details. All the details that you have at the birth registry, at the death registry, at KRA, at so many other agencies. I'll mention them as we go. At the touch of a button, somebody will have all that information. Woe unto you if you are Bobby Wine and the guy who has that information is Yoweri Museveni. Because when they have your DNA, there's something they can do with it. I'll mention it as we go. So I kind of like checked these guys who are supposed to be watching over these things, right? There's some guys who are supposed to be the watchmen, like what they had back in the day in the ancient cities. They would have two guys at the top who would be watching this kind of stuff, and they would warn the people that something dangerous is approaching. In the jungle, I think they call it Sentinels, and yes, the watchers who are supposed to be watching. And I checked a tweet from Senator Mutula Kilonzo, and this is what the tweet said, right? By the time the government starts collecting DNA and other data, the data protection law must be in place. The privacy of this important information is a matter of national security. So that's what he had to say. And his problem was that the data protection law was not in place. From my information, this data protection law has been in Parliament for 5 years, right? We're in 2019, so it must be in Parliament from around 2014. Right when they were starting to test this system of collecting DNA, that data protection bill was in Parliament, and it's still sitting in Parliament. But this thing has gone through all the stages, and now we're in the dangerous stage, right? Implementation, expansion. So anyway, my problem with Senator Mutula Kalonzo was that his problem was the data protection law, not that they are collecting DNA, right? In the UK, they have a similar kind of system where they collect DNA, but they collect it from criminals. And then they only collect it for a specific period. And one of the things I tweeted back to Senator Mutula Kilonzo, and I told him that what right do they have to collect this kind of information, right? That when it comes to DNA, the evidence that there was a crime and that you're implicated in that crime in a certain kind of way is the only thing that would merit them asking you for your DNA. You should be asking at first. And then when they have very strong evidence, then it should be, like in that case, it should be coercion, forcing. It should be compulsion, right? Let's say it's a rape case and you are the scene, and there's very, very strong evidence that you are the perpetrator, right? Then in that case, to confirm or to deny, then your DNA would be necessary. You get what I'm saying, right? Like there's evidence that you are a specific crime and somebody got shot, and they have some DNA evidence and they need to match it to somebody. Since it was you, there's strong evidence that you were there, then at that time they can ask you for your DNA, and if there's very strong evidence, they can obtain it by compulsion. You get what I'm saying? But just collecting, when you're going to get for your ID, collecting somebody's DNA, that's very dangerous. And I'll speak about why it's dangerous as I continue. But these guys, they have given in already. Our watchers, they have given in already. And their problem is not that these guys are collecting a DNA from us. The problem is how that DNA will be managed. Because in the UK, the DNA is for criminals alone. In Kenya, it will be for everybody when you get an ID. And then they will have it, from what I'm getting, forever. In the UK, they have specific time limits for having that DNA in place. And I think it's proportional to the crime. So this thing, I think, from my opinion, it's a relatively new way of oppressing people that's coming into the world. And Kenya is at the forefront of this kind of oppressive system. So I think our watchers have failed. Because before this thing sailed through parliament, they should have pushed for it not to sail in the way it sailed through parliament. And even if they could not do that, they should have pushed for that data protection bill. And even if they could not, they should have raised the alarm at some point in the past. Not now when it's already law. So anyway, I checked that. And I checked also there's Kwame Owino, and he's part of this think tank. It's called the Institute of Economic Affairs. And he asked a very important question. So which entrepreneur has lied to the government that capturing DNA information and physical addresses is a sound response to crime in Kenya? Again, in most of my videos, what I say, they actually do bad things in the name of doing good things. And that's how they commit the worst crimes, like this one, collecting highly personal information. And it has a danger, and I'll speak about it. So Kwame brings in a new element, tenderpreneur, that somebody perhaps is going to profit from this system because there is no data to support the fact that collecting all this information would actually deter crime, even terrorism. There is no data to support it. So somebody must be pushing it devoid of the data, devoid of reasoning, devoid of the dangers. Somebody is not thinking about those things. They're thinking about the money. Money rules the world around me. Wu-Tang. Anyway, not to digress. So who will carry out this work? I don't know exactly who will carry out this work, but I have an idea of who might carry out this work and the amount that is involved. So back in the day, I got this report from The Nation. There was a secret restricted tender to push for the procurement of a digital registration system worth 3 billion Kenyan shillings. So already secrecy is already around. Restricted tender, it's already around. And the figures we have, as in Kenya, always nowadays, it's billions. 3 billion. 3 companies might have gotten this tender. Idemia, Copernic, and Credisense ID, right? Here's the funny thing. Idemia is a merger between Obato Technologies and Saffron Morpho. You guys remember Saffron Morpho? The guys who supplied IABC with 3.8 billion worth of Kim's kit. So these guys might have gotten this tender. And remember, Saffron Morpho had sued Raila, Wetangula, and Kalonzo for defamation. But you know, things change. When guys shake hands, handshake manenos, things change. Saffron Morpho withdrew its suit, right? And now they're back again, and they could have gotten this tender. So let's go to the other guys, right? Saffron Morpho was a French company. Copernic, those are the other guys who could have gotten this 3 billion tender. They are a French company, right? And they were founded by British nationals. So they were founded by our former colonizers, and they are currently owned by the French, who are being accused of the Italians of colonizing Africans, because they are colonizing Africans. Like the former Gabon president said, Gabon without France is like a car without a driver, because they have policies in place that make sure that they are still tied to France. It's like neo-colonialism on cocaine, right? Because the British are doing it, but in a subtle way. The French are doing it in such a distinct way that even the Italians are calling them out on it. So anyway, not to digress. Copernic, again, founded by our former colonizers, owned by a company by the French who are colonizing Africans, right? So pretty safe to have those guys having so much data about you, isn't it, right? And then there was Credence ID, right? This one is owned by headed by Bruce Hanson, and this guy facilitated the sale of Saffron Morpho, right? Because it was sold. And then he has US top secret clearance, whatever, credentials. So you can see the guys who will be around this kind of data, right? foreigners, and foreigners who we have done business with, and we did not do business in a way that everybody was happy at the end of that business. If they were happy, then Mr. Odinga would not be so angry at Saffron Mofo, right? And Saffron Mofo would not have sued Mr. Odinga and the others. And the guy who was implicated in that sale of Saffron Mofo is heading another company who could have gotten this contract. And our former colonizers, they are the nationals of our former colonizers. They're the ones who founded this other company, the third one, Copernic. But now it's in the hands of the French who own Saffron Mofo and who are being accused of Italians of colonizing Africa. So anyway, I'm just speculating, but I'm just giving you an idea of how bad things are, where the data could end up, and how Africans would never be free of colonization. Because if somebody owns your ID system, how your citizens identify with each other, if somebody out there has data on my ELO geometry, and he has a history of colonizing African countries in this day and age, I'm not sure. Don't you see it as dangerous? So anyway, I've digressed enough. So what will this? What did we have before? Before, what we had for ID, you just needed your place of residence, your postal address, and there's a lot of information like your clan, all of those other things. And then there was the identification through fingerprints and thumb. And then there was toe impressions in case you don't have fingers, right? Okay. So that was what we had before. What was good with that system? We controlled our own data, not foreigners. Because when you have foreigners controlling certain kinds of data, then you become slaves to them in some way, in some shape or form. Because they can threaten you. Remember, when we said that Uhuru said that Chinese fish is not welcome in Kenya, they threatened us by locking out the SGR funding, the second phase, from Nairobi to Kisumu. So you're giving guys power over you. We didn't have guys with that kind of power over us. Our national identity system, we didn't give them that power. Hacking was difficult, almost impossible, because it wasn't on a digitized platform, right? It was in a paper platform, right? Paper. Because now the records are with somebody at the register of persons. They have to do it manually. As in, you can't hack it. The only way you can do it is go and steal it or erase it manually. But hacking was very difficult. Hacking is not difficult when you're on a digitized platform. And we've seen examples of hacking of our systems before. Would the Americans allow anybody to have control over their digital systems? Would the Israelis give any person any control over that? Would the Russians do that? But Africans in our infinite wisdom would do that. Anyway, so things were also, okay, and the records were permanent, so that's a good thing. What was wrong with that system? Like, why do we feel that we need a change? We need to digitize? Because of corruption, of course. In the last census in northeastern province, right, we discovered that the population from northeastern had grown by threefold, from less than 1 million in 1999 to 2.3 million in 2009. As in 10 years, threefold population growth. It is impossible. It never happens. And we all know why that population grew that fast. Because the guys at immigration, the guys at the register of persons, the guys who will be given this data of my earlobe geometry, of my iris pattern, the guys will be given this data. They have been registering persons who are not Kenyans. And that's why the population has grown as not based on normal patterns. Because the Oparanya, the guy who is the chairman of the governors right now, he actually cancelled results from that area because they grew too fast compared with other regions. And those guys had fewer women. But the population rate is growing exponentially, more than the other regions. So of course corruption is a problem, and when you digitize, it's harder for people to mess with this system on the ground. When it comes to people at the top who actually run the systems, who knows? Tedious work if you wanted to retrieve your records, right? Because now when somebody you have to go manually, right? And they have to search for your records manually. So it's very, very tedious if some information of yours is lost. And then inefficiency in sharing records. Like if the DCI needs records, if KRA needs records, if other guys needs records, sharing it is very difficult when it's a manual system. So that's why you had to digitize. So to fight corruption, to make sure that it's easier for you to find your records when you're searching for them, and then to increase efficiency in sharing information across government departments. So Uhuru, where his stand on this matter, he signed it into law, so that pretty much says where his stand is on this kind of identification process. And he says the new system will facilitate the creation of the National Integrated Identity Management System, right? Remember, the name of this system was, the Integrated Population Registration System. So this one will facilitate the creation of the National Integrated Identity Management System. He said the system will generate a unique identification number, Huduma number or service number, and he orders that all Kenyans should be digitized and should have that Huduma identification numbers. So that's why he's stand on this issue. So like the watchers, they have already accepted that this system is coming to place. The president is actually pushing for it despite the dangers. What's up with our leaders? How will the government use this system and numbers? They will centralize printing and distribution of IDs and birth certificates, death certificates, driving licenses, passports. Again, efficiency in the task, in how the government operates. So that's one. A single source of personal information for all Kenyans and registered foreigners. As in, what could go wrong with that? Like a single source of information. What could go wrong with that? Honestly. So anyway, it's a good thing when you centralize information and you can access all your information on one given platform. It's good for security forces as well. And it's also good for hackers because you don't need to go far. You just need to break one system. And then fighting insecurity, like when it comes to, you can identify criminals very fast. Yes, you can identify criminals very fast and you can move on them very fast. You can, even if they are running away, you can have that bit of information that would help you to capture them quickly. So that's the theory behind it, right? And criminals know this theory, and that's why guys can escape the US intelligence system, even though it's more advanced than whatever we are trying to build here. So anyway, there's another one, sharing it with various government agencies, which I think is one of the principal reasons why they should have this kind of database. Again, the database is too extreme. You don't need the geometry of my earlobes. As in, honestly, can't I keep that? The iris patterns, can't I keep that? Government agencies to have this information, they'll include the Land Registry, National Social Security Fund, NSSF, law enforcement agencies, NHIF, KRA. KRA will have this information. Immigration Department, okay, financial agencies, I'm thinking like HELB, like there's this body that distributes assets of people who have died but have not, unclaimed assets authority or something, I don't know. There's the National Transport and Safety Authority to have this information. IBC will have this information, and universities will have this information. So a lot of people have this info, right? And will they kind of like, you can have this information, you cannot have this information. Like universities, why would they have information on my iris patterns or my earlobe patterns? Why would KRA have that kind of information? Why would NSSF have that kind of information, right? And the guys had problems in NHI, the Ministry of Health, having that information, because then they would use that to identify certain groups of people with certain diseases, and then discrimination against those groups would be easy. So there's actually a fight already going on against this kind of information. And then here's another thing. Private agencies will also have this information, banks. And I'm thinking if banks have this information, then credit reference bureaus will have this information, of course. So as a citizen, the government will not have enough of your personal information. It will always want more. And then the guys that is given this information to, they will always want more. Because banks will now have it, credit reference bureaus will have it, and then insurance companies will also ask for a bit of it, especially the DNA part. And I'll touch on that as we go. So anyway, if you're feeling squeezed about KRA right now, wait until these guys get through with this kind of information. There'll be nowhere to hide, and then there will be taxes all over, and then there will be... It won't be good for the citizen because you're being squeezed from all sides. And who will have a field day when it comes to accessing credit? Shylocks and pawn shops, they will have a field day. So if you are thinking of a business, go and open that one, because guys are going to find it very hard to access credit, and they'll have to sell their assets to access credit. So if you're looking to eat in that kind of way, that's a way of eating. What can somebody do with your DNA information? Why is having your DNA information dangerous? They can use it for research purposes. Like they'll have an entire pool of DNA markers to study, like the trend of diseases in Kenya. Like, yes, the kind of diseases that are affecting us, the males, the females, age groups, and all of those things. Researchers can use that information. And they can use it for positive purposes, they can use it for negative purposes. And at times, you don't really need to ask for that information. You can just break into the system, because it's a centralized system, and you get all that data. Whether the guy who runs the system knows it or does not know it. The best way of preventing those kind of breaches is by not having that data. Or moving to like the UK, having that data for criminals only, right? But that's a serious danger that's that people are looking at. Researchers using it for research purposes, to study diseases. Again, remember that they can use it also to develop diseases. Like the first cases of Ebola, guess why they happened in Uganda? And I think it was a military research facility, a US military research facility that first diagnosed that thing. I'm not really sure, but investigate on that. Again, danger. They can use it for research purposes, to study diseases, or in worst case scenarios, to develop diseases. And now, as always, Africans are the guinea pigs. And here, we have given them one centralized location that they can break and access that data. Insurance companies can use it to determine your viability as a client. Like banks will already have this information, right, to determine who's creditworthy and not. Now, KRA will have this information. Okay, let's focus on the private agencies. Banks will have this information. So why not give it to insurance companies as well, so that they can determine like the rates, the premiums that they'll have or that they'll charge. Because right now they're really complaining that it's not really as profitable to be an insurance company as it should be in Kenya. But if they had this kind of data, they can increase their profitability. If you don't give them this data, then perhaps they can buy it on the black market. Because by putting this data in a place where people can retrieve it, scrupulous or unscrupulous people, you have created a market for it. And buyers will come calling. Then people can use it to market certain products to you. Like if they have your genetic markers, right? Then they would know, like your DNA right now, they would know what kind of diseases you might be suffering from, or like your genetic diseases that you might have. And they can actually use this stuff to market certain products for you. Like if they know if your family is prone to obesity, then why not market fast foods to you? Again, this stuff will not happen as plainly as I'm saying it will happen. This guy will sell data to this guy, and this guy will sell this data to this guy, and eventually you'll see advertisements popping up on Facebook, on YouTube, on WhatsApp, and they're information that would actually appeal to you. in a very, very kind of personal way. And you wouldn't know how they got that information. But they would know somebody somewhere sold that information to somebody. And there's a lot of information for your data. Then to reveal private genetic information. For example, imagine you're a leader and somebody reveals some information that you are sick or that you are going to die based on a genetic markers. Because when you breach this kind of data, you don't go around shouting about it. You lie in wait like a lion waiting for the gazelle. And at its proper time, you try and sell this data. Or you try and use it against specific leaders. And if this data will be in the hands of people who are under our former colonizers or our present day colonizers, then can you imagine that they won't use this data in future? Okay, another unconfirmed thing that I want to say about DNA is that I think one of the documentaries that I usually watch, I watched somewhere that they can actually use your DNA to develop a specific strain of disease or something that can target you specifically. If they have your DNA, they can develop something to target you specifically, right? So that's another dangerous thing. And like I said, researchers can use it to study diseases or to develop diseases. And then the other one that everybody I think would be very much, it's kind of like a conspiracy theory, but it's a valid conspiracy theory. Developing clones. They can actually do that to develop clones, because now they have your DNA and they have ways of developing clones. What stops them from doing that, honestly speaking? And we know technology is increasing. So anyway, guys have been hacked before. There's a site called MyHeritage where people go and check, they give their DNA over there and those guys check their heritage, and those guys were hacked. 92 million user emails and addresses and passwords were stolen. 92 million people were affected by this breach. They didn't actually get to the DNA, but they got close to it. And they can actually do that in future. Now, when it comes to Kenya, right, we have a history with hacking. Kenya Defense Forces Twitter was hacked in 2015. National Environment Trust Fund website was hacked in 2015. Integrated Financial Management Information System, IFMIS, was hacked in 2017, and 800 million worth of tenders was awarded to scrupulous persons, right? The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they were hacked in 2016. Staff emails were stolen. Access to staff emails. The Communications Authority of Kenya, the guy who's supposed to advise others on hacking, they were hacked in 2017. So we have a history of hacking and all this kind of stuff. I hope that I've presented information in a coherent way, in a way that's helpful. This thing is dangerous. We need to move slow with it. And we need to reduce the kind of data that these guys would have. My earlobe geometry, my iris pattern, I do not feel comfortable with the government having that kind of information. My fingerprint is enough. Anyway, that's what I had for today. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you for watching. As always, subscribe to my 183 subscribers. Thank you for subscribing. Bye-bye and take care.